Welcome to the webinar. This is Dr. Jonathan Karp. I'm very excited to have you here, primarily because I love sharing this information with people. It empowers them to be able to take more control over their health, especially with a condition like psoriasis that a lot of people are told that there's nothing that can be done from a natural perspective. And it's just something that I like to publicize because the truth is, a lot of people that come to me and see me in my practice as a conventional dermatologist aren't really interested in learning about natural interventions. I mention it, but the fact is that a lot of people come in asking for medications. A lot of them are just want that because to be honest with you, brutally honest, it is a lot easier, in a sense, to take medications for psoriasis than it is to make lifestyle changes. And so a lot of people are not open to that. In fact, I've counted it, and it's basically a little under 1% of psoriasis patients that I interact with are really interested in taking a whole lifestyle approach. But that got me the idea that if I brought it online, I'd be able to find people who are interested and maybe get the information out to more people. And that is really primarily the reason why I'm doing this. So who am I? Why should you listen to me? Well, this is just a brief biography of me. I was born in South Jersey. I'm a Jersey boy. Grew up in a family of doctors. My father's a doctor who still practices on occasion. Went to Rutgers University and in New Jersey, which is a state school in New Jersey, and started medical school actually as a junior as part of a special program that allowed me to finish med school a little bit early. Did a year of internal medicine at Rutgers in New Brunswick, New Jersey, and then 3 years of dermatology at SUNY Buffalo. Started my practice in the year 2000 and have been in practice since then. In 2004, had a health crisis. And at that time, when I was going through that, I started to learn a little bit more about natural interventions and how to boost the immune system. And it really opened my eyes to really a lot of things that are actually published in the medical literature, but are just not very well known and just not emphasized in medical education. Really opened my eyes from a personal perspective and how I would choose to live my life for the rest of my life for the years that I'm blessed to be given. And it's been something that is personally of interest to me, and that's how it started back in 2004. I always lived in a healthy way, and I was always interested in learning about nutrition and how your mental state affected things. But really, when you are dealing with a health crisis on your own, it really forces you to wake up and look at things from a brutally objective perspective. What was fortuitous for me was in the same year, I had a patient, Karen, who came in, and she had lupus, really bad, severe lupus, such that I had her on medications that I would drive home at night, and when I'd hit a red light, I would think of her because I would just be scared of all the medicines that I had her on. Because I was putting her on, she was on a lot of organ transplant medications that I was using to suppress her immune system. And I got her off some of those, and she came back a couple months later, completely clear. She cleared herself, really. And she pointed me in some directions of autoimmune disease modifications that I hadn't encountered in the medical literature since I was going through my own natural healing education. And from that point on, when it comes to lupus or psoriasis or atopic dermatitis, all of these conditions have an immune basis to them. And I started to implement some of the things that I learned from the medical literature that thankfully were introduced to me by Karen. And of course, I broadened my knowledge from that point on and started to use that information to help some of the patients that were interested in taking a different route to healing. And from that point on, 2005 onward, I've sort of refined 14 steps that we're going to go through in this webinar so that you can be given the tools to be able to make the changes that you need to make to improve psoriasis in a lifestyle modification way, if that's something that you're interested in. So, who are you? Well, generally speaking, I recommend that you do not implement all of these things at once. We'll go into that in one of the steps. If you're on blood pressure medications and you're on diabetes medications, you need to discuss any sort of changes that we discuss in this webinar with your doctor. So I'll just say that medical disclaimer again. If you're on blood pressure medications or high blood pressure medications, the interventions that we're going to be discussing here, you need to talk with your doctor before starting, because you'll need less of the medicines, because you'll overall be getting healthier, you'll be losing weight, your blood sugar will be under better control. So we're talking about people with stable plaque psoriasis, and hopefully you're interested in learning more about lifestyle interventions. I wanted to address this in the beginning because a lot of the people who come in to see me who are interested in doing natural, quote, natural interventions, I want to discuss what, often they're very frustrated because they say, well, I tried fish oil, and then I tried gluten-free diet, and then I tried this, and then I tried that. Why is it that single natural intervention fails? Is because the premise is wrong. We're all trained in medical school to say, well, a diagnosis is given and then you give a certain medication. So the premise is just like modern medicine. It's based on single interventions, so taking one medicine for one condition. But when we're talking about affecting the entire body's systems, all the systems, and we're talking about natural interventions, in order to make a significant effect, you have to understand all the dimensions of a particular condition, from the beginning to the end, from top to bottom, so that you can have an understanding of why just adding fish oil or changing to a gluten-free diet by itself is not going to necessarily be what is going to cause enduring changes in psoriasis. You need to add these things up, and oftentimes the effects are not additive, they're what are called synergistic. So additive is 1 plus 1 equals 2. Synergistic is 1 plus 1 equals 4. And when you start combining different things, whether we're talking about supplements plus stress reduction plus alcohol avoidance plus whatever, as we'll discuss shortly, those become synergistic. It's not just one on top of the other. It's like almost multiplying them together. So what are the dimensions of psoriasis? Well, they affect so many different parts of your body. It affects the immune system, the gastrointestinal system. A lot of, quote, naturopaths and functional medicine doctors and integrative physicians often point to the gastrointestinal system as sort of the starting point of psoriasis. I'm not sure I 100% agree with that, because I think it's a lot more what we call multifactorial. But there is no question that by getting the gastrointestinal system into better shape, psoriasis and other autoimmune diseases do tend to actually improve. And so a lot of the reasons why certain things work is because that they're modified, and perhaps there is some trigger in the gastrointestinal system. Of course, it's affecting the skin first and foremost, and by getting a better understanding of what's happening in your skin, it actually lends strength to you being able to make the changes that you need to affect that. Of course, mental effects, so we're talking about stress, emotions, social interactions, and really just thinking about things from an overall inflammation perspective. And that just basically means, how do we put out the fire that is psoriasis? Because what we're finding now in the medical literature is a lot of information showing us that in psoriasis, if you have it on your body, there's also some vascular inflammation, that when it's affecting a certain amount of your skin surface area, we can actually show in different scans that there is inflammation in the aorta and some inflammation in the heart as well. So there's this overall inflammation aspect, and when we have an understanding of that, it makes it a little bit easier to proceed through the 14 steps. On top of that, really to get a good grasp on things, we should always think of things from the 6 levels of healing and knowledge. And on my other educational videos that you can find across the internet, I always go through these 6 levels. There's the physical level, of course. There's the emotional, intellectual, spiritual, social, and moral. And you wouldn't necessarily think that all of these would have an impact on psoriasis, but I can tell you that they do. Now, it doesn't mean that you have to fix all 6 of these. In fact, I always tell people that this follows something called the 80-20 rule. And the 80-20 rule says that 20% of things make 80% of the effects. And this is basically found throughout society where, 20% of people own 80% of things, 20% of your clothes you wear 80% of the time. In businesses, 20% of customers make 80% of the profit. This translates throughout all of life in many different ways. It's not always exactly 20%, but I think you get the idea. And when it comes to healing, natural healing, and really harnessing your body's natural abilities to cut down inflammation or reverse a condition, the 80-20 rule follows. And for some, it might be physical and emotional. For some, it might be a spiritual connection that can kind of flip the switch. For some, it's intellectual, where they just need to get a grasp intellectually of what's going on, and then they are able to make those decisions that they need to make with more certainty, more strength. So you don't have to necessarily go through every individual level here. Don't necessarily have to do that. You need to figure out for yourself what is making the biggest impact. And as I can tell you, a lot of people, when they get their stress and their ability to handle stress down in a certain way, the psoriasis can improve dramatically. So, but it's important for you to have sort of this in the back of your mind when you're thinking about just overall healing. So I have a 14-step checklist, which we're going to go through as quick as possible. And at the end of this video, you'll be able to schedule, if you'd like, a 30-minute free, complimentary call with me, trying to get this information out. So let's go through the 14-step checklist. So step 1 is food. So I know 1 pound of leafy greens sounds like a lot, but a big salad and some steamed greens at night is going to take care of that. So you want to get a big salad in during the day and then have some steamed greens another part of the day. Ideally, what would be even better is if you just pay attention to sort of the rule of half pound of raw and a half pound of steamed. And a half pound of steamed vegetables really is not, it sounds like a lot of greens, but it really isn't once you build up to it. Obviously, if you're not used to eating vegetables all that much, and then all of a sudden you start to try to eat 1 pound of leafy greens, you're not going to be able to handle it. But our bodies are naturally designed to be eating a lot of plant matter, and you can build up to this. So you don't have to do everything all at once, just something that these leafy greens provide such an amount of anti-inflammation. It's so important that you slowly incorporate that. Next is 1 handful of raw nuts per day, not peanuts, but almonds, walnuts, not cashews either, preferably almonds, walnuts, pecans. And the reason for that is that they provide essential fatty acids. And these are the fatty acids that actually even can help with inflammation, but also provide good fats for providing an oil barrier to your skin, which can help with the inflammation in your skin. The same thing goes with 2 tablespoons of flax seeds per day. These need to be ground up and put into a smoothie, or some people add them to salads, or some people bake with them if they're making sort of a low glycemic, almond bread or almond cake. There's lots of things you can do with ground flax seeds, but they have so much. They also have essential fatty acids, but they also have anti-cancer effects, and they also provide a lot of fiber to help heal the gut. And again, you're certainly going to work up to these things. Of course, if you did that, if weight is an issue, just doing these 3 steps would essentially, a lot of patients will lose 10 to 20 pounds just doing this, and not even necessarily avoiding anything else, just sort of concentrating on the additional aspect of adding these things in. Step number 2 is to subtract inflammatory and allergic foods from your diet. So eliminate all vegetable oils, basically all seed oils like canola, sunflower, safflower, etc. And also not to eat more than 3 tablespoons of a good quality, high quality olive oil or coconut oil if you want it, but no more than 3 tablespoons because it is a calorie load. It's 120 calories per tablespoon, and that adds a lot of extra calories. And especially if weight is an issue for you, and weight loss does cause improvements in psoriasis, you want to watch these oils, which would mean that essentially you're giving up fried foods here. Yeah, once a month if you want, but I'm giving you sort of these 14 steps in their purity, um, in the state that are like the ideal state. Eliminate dairy, wheat, and sugar. Again, you don't necessarily have to do this forever, but certainly if you're going to give this a try, then you would eliminate all dairy, all wheat, and sugar. And the third one, which is something that I used to leave until the very end if we weren't responding, I've actually moved it up, and that is to eliminate nightshades and lectin-containing foods. There was a book by the name of The Plant Paradox, which talks about lectins, and I was lucky enough to spend the day with the author in his office to see how he practiced. And it was really a remarkable day. The author's name is Dr. Stephen Gundry. And I saw that the same interleukins, those immune chemicals that are in your system that sort of recruit the immune system to cause inflammation, he would measure in the blood. This is not something that is ordinarily done, but he wants to monitor these inflammatory cytokines, they're called, so as to see what effect diet has. And I saw patient after patient who gave up nightshades and lectin-containing foods, their levels, amazingly, the same levels that some of the medications that we use to treat psoriasis affect, those went down just by going on a lectin-containing diet, a lectin-free diet. So lectins are found in a lot of plants, but mostly our main source of them is beans. Now you can eat beans as long as they are pressure cooked. That gets rid of the lectins. And if you do that, then you can get a lot of the lectins out. Nightshades are potatoes, tomatoes, eggplants, and you can eat these as well if you de-seed and de-skin them. So that's something to pay attention. If you wanted more information, you could read The Plant Paradox. I don't necessarily agree with everything in that diet, but it does give you at least gives you information about these lectins, especially if you have a condition like psoriasis. And if you want to talk about this more on the 30-minute call, definitely we can spend the time talking about that. Step number 3 is to dramatically reduce or eliminate alcohol. There are studies, one recent one that was actually done, well, it might have been a year or two ago, that showed beer and psoriasis in women got worse with beer. Beer made psoriasis worse in women. But in general, alcohol creates something called acetaldehyde in your body, which is a toxin. And for psoriasis, again, we're trying to get our bodies in like the optimal state. And again, it doesn't mean you're going to have to completely eliminate alcohol forever. I'm not trying to reduce every pleasure in life. There are ways of doing all these steps and making your life incredibly pleasurable. And I can tell you from the hundreds of patients that have gone through this protocol that their lives are dramatically better in every single way, and they have been able to figure out how much alcohol and how much bread and how much tomatoes and beans they can eat. There are ways of, it doesn't necessarily mean that you're going to have to give up these things forever. We have to enjoy our lives, and as I said, the hundreds of people who have gone through this, they enjoy their lives tremendously. But they also made significant changes in their life as well. Step 4 is to reduce animal protein to only 20 or 30 grams per day, which is not a lot if we're used to eating a lot of animal protein every day. A lot of Americans are used to eating eggs for breakfast, chicken salad for lunch, and some steak for dinner. This would basically be 1 serving per day max. And you might be thinking, well, is that going to be enough protein? It's enough protein if you're getting that pound of greens in per day and your handful of nuts per day. So you don't have to worry about protein. But the animal protein in this situation is when people increase it to the levels that people are used to in America, which is not a normal amount in the scheme of human history, we were not meant to consume animal protein at every single meal. So I don't want you to necessarily have to give up animal protein, although you certainly could if you wanted. Just limit it to 20 to 30 grams per day. So in a can of sardines, there's probably around 20 grams per day. So that's a very small amount. It's maybe it's palm size piece of chicken, and that would be the extent of the animal protein that you would eat per day. If you want to talk about this more during the 30-minute call that you'll schedule at the end of the webinar, we can talk about that as well, and how to make your diet easier for you if you're going to give these steps a try. Step number 5 is to get your blood levels checked. Get your B12. There are some studies to show there are some anomalies in psoriasis patients with vitamin B12. And to get your vitamin D level somewhere between 35 and 50. You'll see a lot of reports on the internet about having levels much higher than that. And I'm fully aware of those recommendations, but I don't, from my experience, don't feel like you need to have super high levels. You could certainly aim around 50, but I think that you just want to make sure you're not low, and you could always push it a little bit above 50 to see things. But at that point, you can be part of testing things. You can be a part of this. So you get your level checked, and ask your doctor for a test, or you can get, nowadays there are labs places popping up all over where you can go in and order your own lab tests. I think this is the future, where patients can have a little bit more control over their health destinies by getting blood work on their own. So you want to get your vitamin D level checked and your B12 level checked. Step 6 is to supplement with turmeric and fish oil. The fish oil has been studied to show in some studies to improve psoriasis, and turmeric is a very anti-inflammatory supplement. It's what's basically, it's an Indian spice, and you can certainly incorporate that into your diet. I have several patients who make golden milk every night, which is turmeric with some coconut oil, coconut milk. Some people add cinnamon, some people add a little bit of honey, and it's a traditional Ayurvedic Indian drink, and it can be quite tasty actually, and you can get your turmeric that way. And fish oil, it's hard to get enough fish oil in your diet from eating fish. So unless you're eating an enormous amount of wild salmon, so I recommend a fish oil supplement and a turmeric supplement if you don't like the taste of turmeric. But definitely worth trying a little golden milk if you can find a good recipe that you like. Step 7 is to get 15 to 20 minutes of inwardly directed relaxation per day. So this step is, for some people, it's that 20% that makes 80% of the effect. Honestly, I can't tell you how dramatic this can be. And what I mean by inwardly directed relaxation, it basically means that you're activating part of your immune system called the parasympathetic immune system, which is sort of the rest recharge part of your nervous system. And why it's important is because a lot of people think that if you just sleep at night, that's enough relaxation. But we are all going through all these cycles all the time. And there's the day cycle and the night cycle. But during the day, there's an active cycle and there's a rest cycle that we are designed for, that we have evolved with over the thousands of years that we've been around. So what is that? What does that mean? It means that you calm down 15 to 20 minutes per day. The best way is to take slow breaths while you're in a hot bath. That is one remarkable way of activating the parasympathetic nervous system. And you should make it almost religious, where you have your 15-minute bath every day. I know a lot of men are not used to taking baths. Certainly you could give it a try. But you could also take a walk where you concentrate on your breath. You could certainly pray or meditate or do Tai Chi or the relaxation poses in yoga. There are so many ways of doing it, but reading a book or watching a movie is not relaxation because it's outwardly directed. You could also read a inspirational or touching book That would be another way. But I think you all have the idea that this needs to be rigorously enforced to have this 15 to 20 minutes of inwardly directed relaxation per day, because the effects are not just lasting 15 to 20 minutes. They balance out your immune system and your ability to respond to stress during the rest of the day. That's why this is so important. Many of you, probably all of you who are listening, have had days where you've been tired and you've been stressed, and the littlest thing just pushes you over the cliff. But then there are other days where maybe you just came back from a vacation and you're relaxed, and the same thing, the same stress that pushed you over the cliff before doesn't affect you the same way. And that's what I'm talking about. It's getting that 15 to 20 minutes in per day where you are resilient. You've developed resilience. And we always think we can't change our stress, but we can affect the way our bodies react to that stress. That's just one way. On a bodily level, we can affect that, but also on a mental level, and we'll talk about that a little bit later. Step 8 is, if you're doing moderate exercise, then probably don't need to make many changes. But I will say that I lived in Southern California for 18 years. I now live in South Florida, and we have a lot of very, quote, fit people who are into their bodies and such in both of those areas. And I encounter many people who over-exercise. And that can be detrimental to you, because it can upset that balance that we just talked about in step 7. So you want to pay attention to the fact of whether, if you're like one of these hardcore, CrossFit type exercisers, then you might want to slow it down, because that can cause inflammation in your body. So, but what I recommend for people who are not is to work up to a 10,000 steps per day walking. If you can do that, that is remarkably anti-inflammatory. Now, if you're not doing any walking and you do 10,000 steps, that would be inflammatory because you're not used to walking that. So you start out with one. You get a counter. You can get one of those Fitbits, or you can get an app on your phone that counts your steps, and you just count your steps, see how many you do, and just slowly over a couple months work up to 10,000 steps. Your body is remarkably adaptable, and you can get there. Step 9 is to monitor sleep, and there's lots of apps on the market for that. And I like to see how people are sleeping. Of course, a lot of people know that they're sleeping well, but if there's even a question of whether or not you're not sleeping well, then we use an app and to measure what type of sleep cycles that you have. And then we talk about how to improve that sleep. The same thing goes. It's that resilience to stress that we all have that is impacted by all of these things that we're talking about. And sleep certainly is remarkably important to balance the nervous system and your resilience, and is anti-inflammatory. In fact, it even affects your blood sugar. Just one night of missing sleep can actually affect your blood sugar for 48 hours. There's a study out there that did that. So if it's affecting your blood sugar, it's affecting a whole host of other things that probably we're not even fully conscious of or fully aware of right now until the medical studies get done. Step number 10 is to avoid toxins. Now there aren't that many studies, very few in fact, showing that toxins are affecting psoriasis. So whereas pretty much everything else that I have been talking about, there are studies to show that these things can help psoriasis. But keep in mind that you're not going to find all that many published studies where they combine an entire protocol like this, because again, as we discussed, the premise of modern medicine is one intervention to one outcome, and we're talking about a whole host of things to help what's going on. So I recommend that people go to EWG, that's the environmentalworkinggroup.org, and look at the household products you're using, look at the water quality in your area if you're drinking from the tap, and really just get a overall assessment of the products you're using and see if there's any toxins that potentially could be having an effect in your body. And again, like I said, maybe there aren't that many studies to show that with psoriasis, but we are looking more at just becoming healthier And not everyone responds to toxins. But there are a small host of people who do. I'm not one of these alarmists that thinks that we're all dying from toxin exposure, but there is no question that there are people, whether it's some genetic susceptibility or or maybe cumulative toxin exposure over the years. I don't know what it is, but there's a small subset of people who just get pushed over the cliff with just small amounts of toxins. And you may not be one of those people, but it's important for you, I think, for everyone to become your own doctor in a sense, to become your own authority. That's sort of my mission in life, is to make people more aware for themselves. And I think it's important for you and maybe for your family to just know, what might be in your environment, what might be in your drinking water, etc. So I won't belabor that point. Step number 11 is to know the challenges that you will face. You'll face not only internal resistance, but resistance from people as well. The internal resistance starts in the very beginning. We are all creatures of habit, and when you try to change your habits or create new habits, you have this internal inertia that's moving that doesn't want you to change. And when you start doing that, you are going to face resistance internally to making changes. I always tell people, though, that after 21 days and if you've been doing something consistently, it just starts to get a lot easier, just like brushing your teeth. And these things become lifestyle habits that, while with brushing your teeth, you may not feel all that much better. With these types of interventions, you're going to start to feel so much better. You're going to feel healthier. You're going to be losing weight, and your skin's going to get better. So you get reinforcement. It's not immediate. Psoriasis often takes a good 4 to 8 weeks before you really start to see things getting better when you start implementing these things. Sometimes it can be a little longer than that if you're slowly incorporating things, which is what I recommend. But you're moving in the direction of health and healing. And when you're doing that, it feels good. You're taking some control over yourself, which feels good. External resistance is also going to happen. And this happens when you start looking better, when you're eating better. People often are resentful that you've been able to make changes in your health. Even maybe they don't know you're doing it for psoriasis, but you've lost weight, you look better, your skin is glowing. And people resent that. They don't want to. It's like an involuntary, they resent subconsciously that you've been able to make changes and they haven't. Likewise, in the family setting, when you start maybe eating differently and you have a family that you're feeding that isn't on board with that, you're going to get resistance in that way. And there's always resistance, but it's resistance that makes you stronger. And that's how I try to educate people that this resistance, if you get through it, you're going to be a much better person for it. And it doesn't mean, again, you don't want to force this on anyone else. This is just for you. So you should not want, a lot of people, when they go through this, they become so empowered because they've been able to make these changes for themselves. They're much healthier, happier, their skin is better, and they just want to share it with everyone. I caution everyone listening to not do that. Only share this information with people who come to you and say, "Wow, you look really great. What have you been doing?" That's what happens. And then at that point, you can share it. Likewise, if you have friends with psoriasis and you've been doing well, you can float the idea that, "Oh, I'm doing a protocol, a lifestyle protocol." You can do that, but I wouldn't force it down their throat because it causes the type of resentment that is not healthy in it. It's not, the resistance is not healthy in any way when you encounter that type of resistance. So let people come to you. Again, you can casually mention it, and if they are interested, then you can share more. And if you're interested in sort of more about that, definitely we could talk about, well, any of these steps when you schedule your 30-minute call. Step number 12 is be careful to not do everything all at once. In the natural world, you'll see people talking about healing crises. And, I honestly haven't really seen that in my practice as much as you see it all throughout sort of the naturopathic literature and the natural healing articles talk about this sort of thing. But I certainly wouldn't recommend doing everything all at once. You're not going to all of a sudden tomorrow walk 10,000 steps, eat pound of greens and 2 tablespoons of flax seeds and take a bath and do everything all at once. This is something that you need to sit back and say to yourself, what do I think the 20% of these suggestions, what 20% of these 14 steps do I think are most impactful for my condition? Because they did a study a survey of people in the UK, asking them about diets and alcohol and relaxation, and most people, they look, you know your triggers, and you take those triggers and realize that's your 20%, and you expand out just a little bit beyond that using these 14 steps and going through it and seeing what happens. But don't do everything at once, because then maybe you might get at this so-called healing crisis. It's hard enough for me as a conventional dermatologist seeing patients who don't want natural treatments to even get people to listen to hearing about this. So if you're going to be doing it, don't do it all at once. Pick that 20% and slowly ease into it over several months. That's what my recommendation is. And especially if you're on blood pressure medicines or you're on diabetes medications, you have to talk to your doctor beforehand anyway. Step number 13 is to deal with jealousy in a positive way. And this is like one of the other steps we just discussed. And you are going to deal with jealousy from not just people necessarily with psoriasis, if you know people with psoriasis, but people who just are jealous that you've been able to make changes. Some of the jealousy can be within your family, which can be very painful to have happen. And I've seen it so many times manifesting in so many different ways. And you just have to realize that almost in a God-given sense, we are meant to become our own authorities in health. And we, as Shakespeare said, to thy own self be true. That is, we're focusing on being true to ourselves, which is sort of almost, I would say, a God-given commandment to be true to yourself. And when you do that, you're going to face jealousy from people. Those people in world history who've been fiercely authentic have always faced jealousy from people. And you're becoming more authentic when you become healthier. You are treating yourself with love and care, and you are healing and becoming more whole. In fact, one of my teachers, Dr. Joel Epstein, always reminds me that the word for healing is from the Greek word kalo, which means health, healing, and holiness as well, is one of the words that it's derived from. And so in a sense, we're becoming more whole and more holy and more authentic, and this is going to cause jealousy, but deal with it in a positive way by realizing that you're becoming more your true self. And step number 14 is to schedule a call with me. You can click the button below. I'm busy, but I reserve some time because I want to get this information out to you. And if you have any questions, I'm almost certain, because I've gone through this with so many different patients, that they can identify that 20% that affects them 80% of the time. And I can help you refine that 20% so that you can make the changes that you need. And I can be a resource for you during this 30-minute call to sort out any confusions or anything that you have questions about regarding these 14 steps. So schedule a call with me. Again, it's complimentary. You get 30 minutes with me. And I'm excited that you've stayed to the end of this webinar. If I could, I would broadcast these 14 steps to people everywhere because psoriasis is just so common. And we can improve people's lives and their overall health in so many different ways by this. If there's something that you've heard about that I didn't mention, there's no doubt that I have an opinion on that, and you can ask me about that as well if you have anything that you would like to discuss with me regarding psoriasis. One of the things I didn't mention is that I also recommend, when we're talking about this inwardly directed relaxation, is something called mental imagery, which is a type of visualization that can help with psoriasis and with anything really. And that's something that I learned from a teacher in New York. We could talk about that as well. But basically, I'm here for you for 30 minutes, and it may be a little difficult to schedule a call. If not, I only put out a little bit of time per day to devote to this. But I urge you, I'm a laid-back guy, and I'm friendly to talk to. And if you have any questions, this is, I don't know how to say it any other way, but this is your responsibility, in a sense, if you're interested in taking more control over your health, you need to step up to the plate and make those changes. And I think for a lot of people that starts with talking to me, because a lot of the time it's just me sharing information that makes the difference. And I can't tell you how many times I've had patients that have come in, they don't have anything wrong with their skin, they just want to thank me for educating them, because they don't need me anymore. They, in a sense, graduate. And while psoriasis doesn't often 100% clear, with any protocol really, although I've certainly seen that done, we can get 95%, close to 100%, where you just use, some moisturizer or topicals, maybe minor medications, but we can improve things so dramatically that you learn how to control it yourself, maybe getting a little extra sunlight on the weekends. There's so many ways of using natural things that when you go through these steps, things get so much better that you learn how to control whatever minute part might be left. And, I think that, as I said, you owe it to yourself to really get to a point where you sort of understand this for yourself. And so that's why I'm recommending that you schedule a call with me. And I look forward to talking to you. So I hope you enjoyed this. I certainly enjoy sharing this. I could probably talk for another couple hours about my passion for this and my passion for people taking control of their own health. And I hope to share some of that enthusiasm with you. I hope it's infectious, so that when you talk to me, some of this enthusiasm that I have for seeing people take control of their own health destinies, I just hope that enthusiasm, rubs off and opens up a new chapter in your life. So I look forward to being a help to that, and I look forward to talking to you on the phone.